Okay, yes, all on. Well, thanks very much for having me speak to you today. I've been at Amazon for about 5 months. I was previously with Battery Ventures, so I'm sure many of you know, and I visited Israel several times with them. And I'm actually going to be back in Israel again, where I'm going to be keynoting a number of the AWS summits this year. This is part of my new job. And on June 21st, I'll be in Tel Aviv for the summit, be keynoting it, doing executive meetings and meeting local people. So hopefully I'll see some of you or see some people from your companies in June in Israel. So the previous talk was actually quite interesting because it sets up a lot of what I think is going on for AWS as well, for Amazon. If you think about the sort of what happens over decades in the industry, there are these centralization sort of trends where everything gets centralized into a cloud. And then you start to see a decentralization trend, and these sort of waves come and go. I think we're right at the beginning now of some decentralization. Part of that is just the maybe the fact that we're building out lots of systems of engagement where companies that didn't used to have to build something that talked directly to their customers are doing that. And the things that they're connecting to their customers are maybe traditional things like cars, for example. We've got connected cars, we've got all kinds of devices and IoT in the house and in industry. So where previously an organization was just working on something that they sold through a channel into a customer base and they heard from it when it went wrong, now they're doing continuously monitoring, finding out how well it's being used and optimizing the customer experience. Now this goes back to my time when I was at Netflix for quite a few years. And what Netflix really did for the entertainment industry is reach out and build a customer experience platform, as well as delivering the video. Most of the actual work is in figuring out what each customer wants to see and making sure they're getting the right quality of service. So there's 3 things going on at AWS that support this right now. One is that we have a new and interesting architecture which goes under the general heading of serverless. And the serverless architecture lets you build event-driven functions that are very lightweight, very easy to build, and which glue together all of the APIs and all the high-level services that we've got around, not just AWS, but all the other services. So you might use, say, Twilio for telephony integration and be connecting into a mapping function and an identity function with one of the large social networks. And then your core technology is built as a bunch of functions that run on AWS. I've blogged about this a few times. I don't have any slides today, but if you find my Twitter handle, AdrianCO, there's a Medium account with a number of blog posts there. One of them I called Lambda Everywhere. And what's happened is we started off building this service as really a way to put methods on the object store. So when you modify something in S3, in an object store, you could create a custom method to do something with it. So that was the first piece. We then took that and extended a lot of the capabilities of AWS itself so that they became event-driven. So for example, you can get an event when an instance appears or when it goes away. You can do setup or cleanup functions. So there's a new and interesting area, and I haven't seen a lot of activity yet in this space, but I'm expecting a lot of infrastructure automation to become event-driven using Lambda functions in particular. So if you're in a startup in that space, I think this is a new capability that people are going to start building on. So that's the infrastructure. And then we've got 2 or 3 other things that are built on top of this. One is that we have a CDN, CloudFront. We've given the ability to put CDN actions at the edge using Lambda functions. So it's the same programming model. It's managed and developed in the same way, but instead of deploying to a particular region on AWS, and we have 16 regions now and 42 zones that we can deliver to, you can deliver it to the CDN. And that means it deploys to, I think it's 72. We keep adding them every week. A large number of endpoints, POPs, points of presence around the world. Your code actually deploys, you do one deploy, and it goes to all of those locations. So now when a customer comes and visits a URL that's held in CloudFront, you can actually have a Lambda function intercept and say, okay, I want to take this advertising image and personalize the text on it based on which country this request is coming from. Or I want to redirect this customer to a login page because I don't see the right cookie in their request. And you can customize the data when you choose to go back to the region itself. So that's at the edge. This gives you tens of milliseconds latency to most customers in most parts of the world, rather than, in some cases, maybe 100 milliseconds to get all the way to back into a region. So you can do a lot of things in advertising, perhaps, gaming, and maybe vehicle-to-vehicle communications. This is sort of the kind of capabilities that we'd be looking for. Now, in these vehicles, maybe you want to deploy something in there. We've got a capability called Greengrass that we announced last year, which is that you can now embed a Lambda function in a device. And it's not really, we're not talking about lamp bulbs here. We're talking more about industrial IoT and the slightly larger systems. But maybe in a car, you could deploy a Lambda function to all the cars in your fleet dynamically from a central point. So we've got this ability now to deploy out to the edge. And I know that we have 16 regions. We don't have a region in Israel yet. But we've actually released another capability, which is called Snowball, which is a box. It's basically an Amazon region in a box that weighs 50 pounds. And this is the other thing that I think is interesting. We're now getting to this point where wherever you want to have the cloud technologies that you're used to from AWS, you can actually deploy it in this 50-pound ruggedized container. We can cluster a few of them together, and you can put it anywhere in the world. And we're rolling out gradually across the world, but in terms of deployments. But you can put it on a boat, in military vehicles. You can put it on an aircraft for monitoring the engines. You could put it in a retail store for collecting video. It's 100 terabytes of storage and an instance and a few AWS services. So we're getting beyond the point of AWS being a centralized resource, and we're getting to, this is the very beginnings, the early baby steps of having something where you can actually deploy it to where it needs to be and have a consistent programming model from, of all of these points. And that's really, I think, an interesting new capability. If we're looking at where the startup world is going to be going, I think people are going to figure out how to leverage that, because it's something that we haven't really had before. And then what are we doing with these systems? I want to talk briefly in my last few minutes about a project that I'm involved in. One of the roles I have at AWS is I'm building a team to own open source as an engagement with ecosystems for AWS. So I'm building out the team right now. We haven't really got up and running quite yet, but we've got a few things we're working on. So in particular, following up again from the previous talk, there's a lot of activity around machine learning right now and deep learning. We have a program where last summer we announced that we were picking MXNet as our framework of choice for building out our deep learning capability. We hired a number of people from that organization. Well, it started off as a university project, like most of these things do. So it came out of CMU. There was some work done at University of Washington as well. So we've got a few people that we hired. We've built out a core team, and we're currently providing roughly 1/3 of the commits into the MXNet ecosystem. We're sponsoring it, and we helped the project kind of steer the project into signing up with Apache. So it's going through the Apache incubator process right now. So we're sponsoring it. We're helping build out a hardened version for commercial use, for our own use and for our customers to use, the development environments around that, the documentation, tutorials, pre-built models, all of those kinds of things. So we're doing quite a large investment in this, but we wanted it to be something where it's a collaborative operation, using the Apache incubator process to basically have other people work with us on this project. So recommend you take a look at MXNet, and very happy to see everybody, and I'll see you hopefully some of you in Israel in June. So that's my time, so thanks very much.